So 2.3 is finally here after what feels like 7 years because most people seem to run out of things to say about the game halfway through the update cycle for reasons I'll probably get into in another video. And while it's a lot, we've got a new way of processing rerun banners that change the fabric of how to process the save or skip free-to-play dilemma, which is something I'll also talk about in another video a little bit more. But we've also got new meta-defining artifact sets, and we've also got dog ninjas. So let's start with the events and then move on to other things that people want me to talk about more so I can squeeze as much viewer retention out of you fuckers as possible. Like, comment, subscribe. There are several returning events, including two of the best returning events. Energy Amplifier has domain boss fights that have scalable difficulty modifiers and reward you for completing higher difficulties, which I like to call scaling boss events, with Energy Amplifier being the best variation because you have some open world prep to go with it and buffs to take advantage of, and not gonna lie, it feels so much better than the ones that are just the scaling bosses, like the Hypostasis event of a similar nature. And we also have the unique combat-oriented Misty Dungeon with multi-room dungeons and trial characters that can serve to force you to use your nerfed mains or use characters that you haven't necessarily used before. If this update had Wind Chase, aka Prop Hunt, then it'd probably be the most popular update of all time. But we do have our new event as sort of the mini-game event. I'll get into that in a moment. But there's also Bantan Songo case files where we're sneaking around dog ninjas. You know, that's cool. We're getting a Pokeball out of it. We're like rescuing animals, stuff like that. Like and like the Pokeball is permanent. We can now catch pets and put them in the teapot. That's neat. At the very least. Oh, and we have, like, the cooldown event has been announced. The Marvelous Merchant that everybody's going to forget is what the actual event that's coming at the end of the patch is by the time it actually gets there. But let's get to that mini-game event. We're going back to Dragonspine. Yeah, we've got some parkour. We've got a clear the camp combat type thing. And an ice melting thing seems to be designed for Amber, but let's be real. We're just going to use melee pyro characters and just kill the enemies on the course, most likely. Seems fun, doesn't really add a lot of new things, except maybe the ice-breaking part in the parkour. That's really cool. Parkour minigames can oftentimes very much suffer from an identity crisis, but it looks like this one does have its own identity, especially since there's a little bit less focus on gliding than other ones. And I do really like the race course minigames, whether it be the gliding-based ones or this parkour type of thing. This is a good extension of that, and it does have its own identity. Good job. However, the fact that the events aren't even that big of a deal compared to most of the other stuff is kind of telling. Let's get to... Oh, right. Fuck. We have two new hangouts. Yeah, Goro and Albedo are getting hangout events. And the fact that these are an afterthought almost entirely in this video kind of tells you how packed this update seems like it's going to be. Anyway... Artifacts, right. So first, I want to talk about Husk of Opulent Dreams, a very specialized set with only really 4 characters getting full advantage from them, and half of them, they'll be out 3 weeks after patch. So, aside from farming for Goro and Ito, we also have Albedo and Noelle that can take full advantage of the 4-piece bonus. I'd argue that this is now best in slot for Albedo and shifts him into more of a powerhouse status that people will actually fucking recognize. But we'll talk about how this affects Noelle in a moment. In addition, the 2-piece bonus helps Mihoyo be able to design more characters to scale on defense, and provides a 2-piece set that Xinyan can get some utility out of. I mean, it's nice to see Xinyan get something other than shafted, you know? Anyway, let's move on to the Ocean-Hued Clam, the new healer set, which is so much fucking better than Maiden Beloved, it's not even funny. Okay, look. Being able to heal better is great, and, you know, the Maiden Beloved set, even the 4-piece bonus, is like, healing bonus, I don't care. But because if that's all you're doing, then it's not going to work well. Kokomi, for example, takes advantage of her healing capability by having the period of her rotation where she's doing the most effective healing also be the point where she's doing the most damage. And it can be pretty high, by the way. Barbara sucks because of the fact that healing is the only thing she does. I mean, at the very least, with Chi-Chi's healing, it's tied to her damage dealing stat. This set is designed with Kokomi in mind in particular, but essentially with all that text, what that means is that every 3.5 seconds, you get to deal up to 27,000 extra damage, including overflow, which supports pretty much every healer in the game other than Bennett. Basically, Bennett doesn't really get overflow other than his healing won't trigger if you're above 70%, so he's going to do less healing. It's a buff for everybody else in the game that heals, though, which brings me back to Noelle. See, there's a lot of risk with Ito of Noelle basically becoming Ito at home. And to a certain extent, that's very true, but something I'm going to talk about more in about 3 weeks. But here's a little preview of what I'm going to say there. Both of these sets are Noelle sets, so that makes Noelle more viable and, more importantly, very easy to build. You only need one domain, and either set in the domain is going to work just fine and produce mostly the same style of play, although I'd argue it depends on how dedicated you are to her being a healer. Right, so those are the artifacts, and I think that covers everything but Paimon being in the Serena Teapot, and the thing you actually care about, and have been waiting all video for me to talk about. It's banner time, baby. Now, as of scripting, we know this much. Albedo and Yula have banners happening at the same time, with Ito having a banner in 3 weeks alongside Goro. There's a new boss fight, which means you'll probably want to fight that to pre-farm Ito and Goro's essential materials, but they're getting their own video in 3 weeks, so I'll talk more about them later. What I want to talk about right now is Yula and Albedo here, since this is the most immediate choice that people are going to have to make. So let's assume that you have neither of these characters. Which one should you be pulling for? There's a lot of factors to consider, but I'm going to look at various situations where the two would be on equal footing. So, again, let's say you have neither of them. If that's the case, I'd be more inclined to go for Yula here, but it's a lot closer than you might think. While Albedo has a lot of buffs happening, even going into the next banner, many of these buffs also apply to Yula indirectly as well. Remember when I said that the two-piece Husk was good for Xinyan? Yeah, being in the shield also increases physical damage, so that's a positive for Yula, on top of being able to reverse melt or even just plain regular melt with the E abilities, so it's not like Yula doesn't have some potential teammates out of this either. Of course, if you have one or the other, getting the one you don't have is a clear option, since they can actually be quite effective together. Yula wants to be on the field a lot, and Albedo doesn't. So if you add that to the buffs we've already got for Albedo and Yula indirectly, it's a good 1-2 punch with admittedly not as much synergy as other combinations that you could do, but you could probably just also use the other combinations. So what about if you have both of them at C0? Well, I can honestly say that early constellation levels favor Yula. You'd really be going for Yula until C2. Then Albedo becomes a more worthwhile prospect. In my personal opinion, Albedo's C4 opens up a lot more synergies for Albedo than Eula's C4 does for her. But let's be honest, Eula's C4, you could debate that killing weakened enemies quicker is better, and I wouldn't exactly be able to disagree, but that comes down to personal preference. I can't really recommend Albedo's C6 over Eula's, though, at all, but let's be real, chances are if you're in a position to make a decision like that at this point, you already have plans to C6 them both right now anyway, or are tech-tone and don't care about either one of these banners. I'm going to talk about more stuff in later videos, sure, but this is the most immediate information we needed to get out of the way. I may do this a little different in the future, with less emphasis on events, but considering where I'm at now, it seems like a good way to go about it. Let me know in the comments what you thought about what I had to say, or if I missed anything about the artifacts or character builds. Until next time, see you around.